Nieman Foundation for Journalism at Harvard, and older and wiser but friendly institutional cousin of the Kennedy School of Law. And that is my only advertisement tonight. I think it's appropriate that this forum should more or less begin its program this year with a product of that progenitor of the concept of forums, namely what's left of the Roman Empire, that marvelous nation called Italy. In introducing our special guest, I have been asked, for reasons that will become clear, to announce that another featured speaker here at the same hour on October 19th will be the Israeli ambassador to the United States, the Honorable Moshe Arens. I suppose that I was asked, please refrain from applauding until my remarks are finished. I suppose that I was asked to make that announcement to demonstrate that this forum is in fact even-handed, even multifaceted, as it deals with volatile issues such as ours tonight. All I would add to the instruction that I received is my perception about this marvelous institution, the forum, these very open lectures and even confrontations, namely that the ground rules seem to me to permit bluntness, even passion, but also demand civility. Let us try to keep to those ground rules tonight. Oriana Fallaci quite literally needs no introduction, so why am I here? I don't know. She is uniquely known and admired as an astonishing journalist, as an interviewer of the wielders of power in many parts of the world, such people as Henry Kissinger, of course, the Shah of Iran, the late Shah, the Ayatollah Khomeini, Indira Gandhi, Lech Walesa, Golda Meir, and now most recently Defense Minister Sharon. My only question, of course, is why on earth do they all eventually agree to be interviewed and thereby self-destruct? Perhaps Oriana understands one central quality in human nature, namely vanity. Anyway, Oriana dislikes to be notable for this unique skill. She is a writer, as she would like to put it. She has authored many marvelous books, fiction and nonfiction. I won't go into all of them, but the most recent one, I think, was A Man, this novel published in 1980 in this country. Oriana was asked by Nieman Fellows a year and a half ago how she would like to be remembered, and she said it was, here lies the woman who got Stalin out of Tiananmen Square. Now, those of you who are not Chinese don't even understand what I just said, or those of you who are not Stalinists don't understand what I said, but she may explain someday. On second thought, she said her answer to how she would like to be remembered on her gravestone is, here lies a writer. She also said something at the very beginning of her Nieman talk a year and a half ago. I said, why are you here, Oriana? She said, why am I here? I'm reading now from the text, transcript. To begin with, I'm here because it's Harvard, and I've never been to Harvard before. I've been to Yale, so I wanted to see Harvard. We welcome you. Oh, I might, there is a slight medical explanation, not about me, yes. Oriana says that she has a throat problem. You will not notice it, but if she gets a little hoarse in shouting back at you, untrue, I think. It is because she does have a very difficult throat. Yes, you want the podium. So let us welcome her.
What's the light here? What's the light? Okay, I got it. You wouldn't believe it. I'm glad to be here tonight. Not only because this gives me the something on General Sharon, but also, and overall, because this is a school of politics. You study politics. I hope it's true. So I was told. And I hope you have the soul for it, not only the brain. And politics is my natural environment. The air I have been breathing since I was a child, the waters where I have been swimming since I was a teenager. And in spite of the impostors, of the opportunists, the liars, who use politics for their personal interest, their greedy ambitions, their phony promises, in spite of the tyrants who use politics for their thirst of power, their abuses, their crimes, in spite of the murderers who use politics for their killings, their massacres, like the obscene, revolting, medieval massacres of last week in Beirut. I cannot regard politics like those who pronounce the word politics as if it were a dirty word. I firmly believe that politics is a very beautiful thing, or if you prefer, can be a very beautiful thing. One of the noblest activities that a human being can perform, or should I say the recipient of any other activity, the frame outside which the life of a country and of a citizen becomes impossible, and the dream to make this world a little more dignified, a little more bearable, as my mother said to me. Like the children who have been slaughtered last week in Beirut, and many other children of today, Fador to Afghanistan, and the list long. I was born in a place where, and in a time when, politics, as I mean, was forbidden, punished. There was the fascism in Italy then, and those who made politics, as I mean, ended in prison or in an hospital or beneath the earth in a grave. So very few dares to do it. My parents did instead, and particularly father, who had started fighting Mussolini when he was a 17 years old boy, then continued to do it as a man, notwithstanding the persecutions, the torments, and finally had become the leader of the resistance in Florence, my city, during the Nazi occupation. And in February 1944, as a leader of the resistance, he was arrested, to be tortured savagely, then thrown in the cell of a prison under the threat of an execution squad. And here, one day of March, my mother and my younger sister and I were permitted to see him, to bring him some food. We went with a bag full of food, which was promptly stolen from us by the guards, I remember. We were pushed with the other visitors to a dirty room called parlor. And here there was a bench, then a long table. Beyond the table, a dozen of men standing up. Among them, a man with a terribly swollen face full of bruises, enormous violet lips, an eye completely closed. Nobody went sitting in front of him on the bench, so we sat in front of him, silently waiting for my father to arrive. And we were waiting for a minute or so when a voice whispered, "Darlings, don't you even say hello to me?" It was the voice of my father, and it came from the disfigured man that we had not recognized, so disfigured he was. Then the enormous Vibes smiled, a mouth where 3 front teeth were missing because of the beatings, and my father said, "Darlings, don't worry, everything is fine, everything is going to be fine. I did not talk, they know nothing, almost nothing, so they will not execute me. You will see, at the most they will send me to Germany in some concentration camp." When we left, I asked my mother, "Why, mother, why?" And my mother fiercely answered, "Because your father makes politics, because he struggles to make this world a little more decent, a little more dignified, a little more bearable." And yes, I have a high concept of politics, or if you prefer, a very naive one, a very childish one. But on this matter, I never wanted to grow up. The man I loved, the man about whom I write in my book, A Man, Alekos Panagoulis, another naive, used to say that politics is a duty of a citizen, a duty before being a right. By the way, the same words that he used to define freedom. Quote, "Freedom is a duty before being a right." And for such belief he paid with his life, as you may know. I agree with that symbiosis of freedom and politics. Can politics be made outside freedom, or outside the concept of freedom, or outside the search of freedom? But overall, I agree with the choice of the term duty. If one does not feel that duty, I tell you, he is not a citizen. He is not even a man. She is not even a woman, but a vegetable that vegetates in the way to die, to be eaten as a spinach souffle or a salad. By the impostors, tyrants, the murderers. In other words, a thief consciousness, who does not even care about its own survival. Shall we stay here like vegetables, to assist their killing, and to wait to get killed in bloody wars? Let's say the Third World War, if it goes on like this, without protesting, without intervening, without making politics, being political. Of course, there are many ways to go of making politics. One has not to be then tortured and threatened with the execution squad in order to perform his or her duty. I am political, for instance. I make politics, writing the books I write, and making the views I make. That is, providing the people with the elements that people need in order to know, to judge, to intervene. And also intervening myself through the debate, sometimes the fight. I have, with the head of state, or the leader, or the general, I am interviewing. Not that he cares very much about what I say to him. Let's clear it at once. Not that he changes his mind and his actions because of my charges, my protest. Nobody in the world could congratulate me for having influenced Sharon and inspired him to behave. But people who read me do care. And sometimes I can make them change their mind, or at least put some doubt in it. all political, I make politics when I go to see their bloody wars, like Sharon wars. And this is the part of my work, of my duty, I like less. I have followed most of the wars of the last 15 years. I have been in Vietnam in and out for 8 years. I have been in the Indo-Pakistani war, in Bangladesh, in the Middle East conflicts, in the secret PLO bases in Jordan before they were wiped out, not to mention the various insurrections in Latin America and elsewhere, kind of wars themselves. And each time I have hated it, like that American captain in Dak To, Vietnam, who before leading his men to the battle for Kill 1330 said to me, each time is the first time. And each time is worse than the previous time because I know better. You know, there are war correspondents who enjoy going to war, who move well in it, even graciously. The helmet fits them well, and the flak jacket, and the uniform when you have to wear the uniform. I do not. I cannot stand the uniforms. I consider the flak jacket the most uncomfortable sinistment, and I feel absolutely ridiculous with a helmet on my head. One night in Beirut, I went patrolling with the Israeli tanks along the demarcation line and at the museum where most of the combat took place. And more than the probability of getting shot, I kept thinking, thanks God it's dark. Nobody can see how ridiculous I am with this helmet and this flak jacket. Besides, let's face it, they made me feel like an accomplice, a party to a crime. But more than the helmet and the flak jacket and the uniform, I cannot stand the sight of suffering, of death. You know, I'm not a person who easily cries. As a matter of fact, I'm a person who does not, unfortunately, cry. I'm neither a person who gets easily shocked by the horrors. I have seen too many of them to be easily shocked by them. Yet, when I am in a war, my eyes are often filled with tears, and I get such lumps in my throat that I cannot talk anymore. In Beirut, I felt this way. Each time Sharon bombed from the sea, from the air, from the ground, and the sky became red and yellow and black over Beirut, I thought of the people who were dying in that moment, and I could not talk, not even to insult someone one evening said to me. Yet it is kind of exciting. I was so curious to see it, and one has to admit it that, alas, it's kind of exciting. I don't know what the word excitement means when it comes to war, nor the word curiosity. Not even when I went to Vietnam for the first time in 1967 did I have that kind of curiosity. Because I knew already, since I was a child, I learned as a child to run under the bombs, to bear the terror of the artillery shellings, the firing, of the screams, the scratching, the dead, the corpses that stink. I learned in the Second World War that being in a war is not like watching the war on TV, where it becomes a show like a movie or a football game to be interrupted by the advertising of a toothpaste of a wine. I also know what a massacre is. I haven't seen the scientific one in Beirut, but I have seen less scientific ones in Hue, in Vietnam, in Dhaka, Bangladesh, in Mexico City, where I got a couple of bullets in my body, and I tell you, TV does not give the idea of what they really are. Notice, for instance, the photos do not stink. Yes, I know, everybody hates the war or says to hate the war. Yet everybody accepts it as a part of life, or at least as a curse which makes part of the existence. Quotes, war has always existed and it always exists, unquote, without mentioning those who don't hate it at all. And they believe in it, and they play cards for it. The gentleman, let's call him so, a Jewish American for the Institute of Strategic Studies in Washington, whom I met in Tel Aviv at the house of Yael Dayan, the daughter of Dayan, and who pompously said to me, war is beautiful. And someone answered, not beautiful, necessary. War is not necessary, damn it. It is not even an unavoidable curse. I tell you what war is. It is the most idiotic, the most illogical, the most grotesque activity of mankind, the most abject, the most obscene, legitimized crime of the bastards who rule our life, and the last resort of the imbeciles who do not know how to resolve things with their brain because they have no brain. Thank you. And so they make the war. No, they don't make it. They send the others to make it. As I said to the president of Argentina during the Falkland War, I said, General Galtieri, you are a general, aren't you? You are a soldier. And he said, yes, of course I'm a general, of course I'm a soldier. Then I said, good. Now tell me, have you ever been in a war? He blushed and he replied, another kind of war. Then I said, no, 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 no. I mean the real war, the one where they shoot and they die. And he blushed even more and he replied, no, I have not. So I said, that's the problem. Because those who call for the war never make the war. They send the others to make it. Also the gentleman, let's call him so, who worked for the Institute of the Strategic Studies in Washington, had never made a war. He would send the others to make it. The young ones, the best ones in good health, like you. Oh, your health is important. You have to have good muscles and good eyes and good reflexes in order to kill and to get killed in a war. If your chest is too narrow, if your eyes are too weak, if your reflexes are slow, the generals and the gentlemen of the Institute of Strategic Studies will not grant you the honor and the privilege to kill and to get killed. If you have all that to live long instead, they will put a flag in your hand, a weapon in the other, and they will send you to get killed and to kill those in good health and those in bad health, the babies, the old ones, the innocent, everybody who happens to be there. Don't be too healthy, please. Please don't forget what I said, you, future possible victims of the various Galtieris and Sharons of the world. Forget it even less in these dangerous days. Yes, dangerous indeed with what happens in the Middle East. It's getting hot here, especially what I tell you. There is a part of the world where I dislike to cover wars more than elsewhere, and this part is the Middle East. The reason is that I feel so uneasy there, so tied up by dilemmas, reasonings, rages, and incapable of really taking side. You know, once somebody asked Pier Paolo Pasolini, the Italian poet, who is right and who is wrong there, the Israelis or the Palestinians? And Pasolini answered, they are both right and both wrong. He forgot to say that they behave wrongly also when they are right. Oh, I knew before going to Beirut that I wouldn't like anybody there. Neither the Israelis, neither the PLO, neither the Lebanese, nor we Westerners, we are so responsible for the mess we created there after the Second World War, and who keep such a mess alive with our hypocrisy, our cynicism. Our cynicism. I will not recall to you, American, the American hypocrisy, the American cynicism, since you know it very well, how and how much you protect Begin's government. But I will tell you a little episode about the European cynicism. Sharon was still bombing Beirut when the Europeans, mainly French and Italians, were arguing against each other to get the building contracts and rebuild the city. And while they were arguing against each other, the Japanese came. Attends, as usual, as they do when they come as tourists to Rome and fill all those sightseeing buses. They came by boat from Cyprus. They got to Junia, the port next to East Beirut. Then they got to Beirut, and they bought God knows how many bombed buildings, the ruins with the corpses inside. Don't mind. We'll take care of it. We'll rebuild Beirut. Which might be the only truth, a Japanese Beirut of tomorrow, in a place where the lies steam as the corpses do. And the biggest lie of all is the word peace. If you think that Begin has been given the Nobel Prize for peace, if you think that the name of this war was Peace in Galilee, my God, can you imagine a more cruel, chilling joke? I said it to Sharon, and Sharon smiled. He answered, well, that was Begin's choice. But he lied. It was also his choice. It was the government choice. The fact is that Sharon lies so easily. Remember yesterday, scream of Shimon Peres at the Knesset? Why are you lying again? Once Ben-Gurion wrote in his journal, oh, if Arik could do without lying. Begin lies too, and Arafat, and Gemayel, and the Americans, and the Europeans, when it comes to this war, and because of those lies, that orgy of lies, I had to overcome the uneasiness I spoke about before and go to Beirut to see if I found a drop of truth. I went at the very beginning of August from Damascus. At that time, you did not need an Israeli visa to get to Beirut. On the contrary, you had to avoid Tel Aviv, where in order to reach Beirut, you would need a special permission that was valid for 1 day only, 2 at the most, and where you would be given a pain in the neck called liaison officer escort. Oh, a very nice escort, of course. They chose them from among the most handsome, the most likable, the most tolerant, really champions of public relations. Yet, pitiless censors who followed you everywhere and control what you did, what you saw, what you heard, what you wrote, what you filed, and who, of course, would prevent you from trying to reach West Beirut. So I went from Damascus, that is through the road which crosses the Albeca Valley and Tripoli. Then I settled at the Alexandra Hotel, which, meaningful welcome, 1 hour before had been devastated by the explosion of a car charged with dynamite. And here I found my first drop of truth. Because the Alexandra, next to the museum where the Israelis were thwarted by the PLO, was constantly under the fire of the PLO Katyushas and mortars. Moreover, the combat in the pine woods went on day and night, which means Sharon lies with almost as much of himself. He calls it one of the best in the world. But what kind of an army is an army that steals a city as a thief when the enemy is gone and does so to perpetrate a massacre? It seems to me that such army is good only when it faces the weak and the ghosts. And about the shelling that Sharon did again for 3 days, killing another 100 civilians. What kind of a general is a general who needs all that shelling to invade an unarmed city where the people are returning to life? Sharon says that for an Israeli, even the life of one Israeli soldier counts. Good enough. But what about the life of the others? It seems to me that for Sharon, for the Israelis, a life is precious only when it is an Israeli life. I saw many other things in West Beirut, many other drops of truth. I saw what Sharon had done and was doing in the area of Fakani, where the Palestinians lived and where the buildings did not exist anymore, not even the streets. Coventry, 1941, Berlin, 1945. I saw what he had done and was doing in Hamra, the center of West Beirut, where an 8-story building inhabited by 200 or 300 people had been hit with scientific precision thanks to a special device put by his spies, and so it had collapsed like a house of cards, burying everybody under the rubble. These just because Arafat went to sleep there sometimes in the afternoon. There was not an office, an hotel, an hospital, a school, an embassy which had not been struck, if not completely demolished, while the population lived like rats in the basements, waiting to be squashed by the next bombardments, the water cut off, the electricity cut off, the food and the medicines missing. Yes, I saw all the ferociousness of that siege, all the excesses that Sharon denies. And finally, in the following days, back in East Beirut, I saw the Israeli soldiers. I spoke with them. And I did not find one who would say to me, I do not like this war. This war is unfair. Not one. In Vietnam, one could not even count the soldiers who had the conscience and the guts to say, Madam, I don't like this war. Madam, why am I in this bloody war? In Beirut, not one. They all approved it. I had to go to Tel Aviv and resume the story of Colonel Geva, the only one who said, no, I'm not going on doing this war. to find a few who would define this war an unjustified war. Very few in those days. Not as many as one thinks when one watches the Israeli opposition's protest on TV, where it all depends on the angle from which you shoot with the camera, and 100 people see 1,000. The overwhelming majority of the Israelis were with Sharon, I tell you. Bellicose, belligerent, Prussians. I don't know. I don't understand what's happening to that country for which we used to cry. This country which always looks at the others with a complex of moral superiority. It is as if an obscure need of destruction, also self-destruction, would now possess it. A sort of folly of sickness, or should I say a cancer, that attacked their souls. And this is the point that nobody questions. Sometimes out of an old complex of guilt, sometimes out of an old complex of pity, sometimes out of a present fear of being blackmailed by the accusation of disliking the Jews. In my interview, Sharon kept saying that Israel is a democracy. He said it to demonstrate that the whole country shared his responsibilities, Begin responsibilities, that he was not, they are not tyrants who went to power with a coup d'etat. And he was right. But then one should ask, how come that the country elected people like Sharon and Begin? How come that after having elected them, that country, full of moral superiority, did not change its mind, yet went on supporting their decisions, their behavior, their war? How come that they like the war so much that they never refuse one? Finally, how come that some good people there say what I say, but if you scratch them well, you find the same hardness, at least a shadow of that same cancer? When I spoke of Colonel Geva, Sharon told me something that made me explain, oh God, don't make me say that Sadat was right when he claimed that in Israel there are not doves and hawks, but hawks and super hawks. And Sharon smiled. Then he said, when it comes to our security, no doubt, there are not doves or hawks. There are Jews. There are not laborats or liquidists. There are Jewish. This is my answer. I did not see Arafat. Everybody thought that I was there to interview Arafat. She's here to see Arafat. She's going to see Arafat. And nobody believed me when I said that I did not wish to see Arafat. I was there to prepare my interview with Sharon. Preventing your question, I will tell you why I did not wish to see Arafat. And as I'm not here to delight anybody, I hope that my setup will not delight too much those who do not bear my disdain for Sharon. That is, those who wave the horrors of Dachau and Mauthausen as if those horrors had been inflicted exclusively upon the Jewish people. That is, those who make out of the Nazi monstrosities their own exclusive tragedy. That is, those who see the suffering of the persecutions as their personal, private monopoly. And so they blackmail with their past. They brand as anti-Semitic anyone who calls today Israel the Prussia of the Middle East, anyone who does not permit Mr. Begin to say that going to Lebanon makes him feel as if he were chasing Hitler in his Berlin bunker. Let's avoid Hitler's name in this case. Otherwise, it could turn out that someone else resembles Hitler, or at least has learned his teaching very well indeed, especially after the shame of Sabra and Shatila. The time has to come that this fool, the word is not mine, is Ben-Gurion's. He wrote it. To this windbag full of rhetoric and metaphors, again, the words are not mine. They are Ben-Gurion's. He wrote it. That a good part of the world is sick and tired of his biblical pompousness, of his hysterical pretentiousness, of his political stupidity. Yes, stupidity, because only a stupid politician can think of getting free of 5 million people, adding tragedy to their tragedy and multiplying their problem instead of resolving it. Arafat. Why I did not interview Arafat? Arafat and I are not pals. Since I interviewed him in 1972, I dislike him as much as he dislikes me. A couple of years ago, the reporter of a magazine which belongs to my publishers went to Beirut to interview him. Arafat ads asked him if the magazine publishers was Oriana Fallaci publisher, and when the poor reporter answered enthusiastically, yes, yes, I know her very well, they put a gun against his chest, and then they said to him, get out of here if you don't want to get shot. Why exactly, I don't know. I mean, I don't exactly know what he thinks of me. That I am at the service of the Israelis, I guess. Sharon mistress. But I know what I think of him. And what I think of him does not coincide at all with the enthusiasm which has burst for him in my country, where they greet him and kiss him as if he had won the Soccer World Championship. Well, to begin with, I think that he's a shady and ambiguous person who competes with Sharon in the art of lying. He lied to his men when he said that he would never leave Beirut, never. He lied to Habib when he promised that he would evacuate all the guerrillas. He lied to the American congressman when he gave them that paper on which it was supposed to be written that he recognized Israel, and instead it was not so. And he lies when he speaks of peace. He too does not give a damn for peace. He too is ready for the Nobel Prize for Peace. He's a politician, you see. One of those who make people pronounce the word politics as if it were a dirty word. And he collects all their defects, all their faults. His vanity, for instance, included the aesthetic vanity of that beard that he shaves so learnedly halfway in order to look like a Christ who perpetually sleeps in a trench. He does not. He does not. He has very beautiful, well-furnished houses where he sleeps very comfortably, when Sharon does not bomb him. He's rich. Then his arrogance included the coquettish arrogance of wearing that gun at his belt all the time as if he were a warrior. He's not. And in return, he's very well protected by his bodyguards. So why in the hell does he need that gun? Then, and this is the most serious thing of all, his lack of political clarity. Where does he stay? With the Soviet Union or with Saudi Arabia? What are his political views? He never says it. He always repeats the same slogans about Palestine and never explains what kind of Palestine he wants. Democratic one, a Marxist one, a capitalistic one, mystery. But what I mainly dislike in Arafat is his having reached the position of a head of state that nobody elected. Not because he's the best, but because of his old friendship with Sheikh Zaki Yamani, the Saudi Arabia oil minister, and because of his ties with the Saudi Arabia monarchy, which finances him more than anybody else. In other words, I'm incapable of identifying Arafat with the 5 million creatures that nobody wants and who live in the huts and the barracks of Lebanon, Syria, Gaza, West Bank, waiting to be slaughtered by animals without a home, without a homeland. The Palestinians, the new Jewish of the world. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's not that bad. And in such case, I will be happy to repent someday, because I'm always happy to change my mind when it comes to the reputation of a man. I'm always happy to discover that he is better than I thought. But even if I'm wrong in my disliking him, a fact remains about which I'm not wrong. Here it is. Arafat always presents himself as a pure soul who would never do something vile, something evil. Instead he does. At least he has. Not all the bombs that burst in Jerusalem are his dissidents' bombs. And one cannot say that in Lebanon the PLO has always behaved as the Red Cross. The Damour massacre on February 1976, I'm told, was theirs. And, as if these were not enough, for years he has terrorized and blackmailed us with his hijackings, his kidnappings, his dynamite. Munich, Zurich, Antwerp, Rome airport, countries which had not stolen him any land. For years, he has trained and provided weapons to the terrorists of any color, including those who torment my country and try to assassinate the democracy that people like my father built with their blood. My president, the president of the Italian Republic, who received him at the Quirinale and invited him to lunch, seems to have forgotten this. And so the illustrious politicians who invited him, and almost all the heads of the political parties who honored him, and the unions, and the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and the mayor of Rome, who took advantage of the fact of being a Jew to kiss him more than anybody else. They introduced him to a lot of people. They showed him a lot of things during his visit. They forgot to show him the grave of Aldo Moro, all the graves of the Italians who have been killed in these years with the weapons given to them by the PLO. Had I interviewed Arafat in Beirut, I would have said it to him. And I would have recalled to him many other disagreeable things. But I should not in Beirut. Because in Beirut, he was among the victims, a victim himself. In Beirut, he was a wounded man, a desperate man, a defeated man who could die any moment. And I do not hit wounded people who can die any moment. I hit people who are safely and comfortably seated on their thrones. If ever I will ask to see Arafat again, it will be when he is in a totally different position. But it goes without saying that even then, I would not feel towards him as I feel today towards Sharon Begin Shamir, the Troika of Jerusalem. At least Arafat has a dream. Those three, instead, have lost even their dreams. In Beirut, I would rather see Bashir Gemayel, which is the reason why I remain more than necessary in that devastated room without windows at the Alexandra Hotel, deafened by the burst of the artillery, dulled by the lack of sleep, because each time I lay down on my bed all dressed up with the shoes, ready to jump up and run, a new bombardment started. And overall, tormented by the stupid jokes and the insulting remarks of the Israeli escorts, which provoked me as they would provoke the French, because the Italians made part of the international forces. They did not want them. You see, Bashir Gemayel was not in the situation of Arafat, protected by Sharon, who saw in him the perfect vassal of a vassal Lebanese state, sheltered by him own shrewdness, thanks to which he had not joined the Israelis in the war. He lived in the anticipation of his triumph as future president. I mean, with him, I would not have the scruples I would have with Arafat. With him, I would have felt at my ease, and easily I would have asked him about the fact that he was a fascist son of a fascist, that Pierre Gemayel, who founded the Phalange after a trip to Berlin out of imitation of and out of admiration for Hitler, or about the fact that his family controls the biggest drugs trade in the Middle East, mainly hashish, included that intelligence champion of his brother Amin, who has become the president of that unfortunate country, or about the fact that, let's face it, he was a killer. True that the Palestinians had massacred the Christians at Damour, but before that, he had massacred the Palestinians 3,000 at Tel El Zatar. True that his 18-month-old baby had been blasted in a car by the men of his rival Soleiman Frangi, but before that, his man has slaughtered Tony, the son of Soleiman, and his wife and their child, 3 years old. The wife and the baby by torture, while Tony was kept to watch. Gemayel answered that he would see me. He was extremely flattered by my request, his head added. He used to read me avidly. Well, I did not teach much to him either. Then he changed his mind and postponed the interview to September. I left saying, okay, let's hope that we're both alive in September. I am, for the moment, in spite of what I'm saying. He's not. I left and I went to Tel Aviv to see Sharon, again provoked. this time by the Jerusalem government officials, because the Italians made part of the international forces. And here I have the interview that I have been asked to read to you in some excerpts. You may be interested to know that it took place in his farm the day before the first evacuation of the PLO from Beirut, and that it went on for 10 hours. That is, from 9 in the morning to 9 in the evening, with the exception of 2 hours during which he had to fly with his helicopter to Tel Aviv. I also saw him again the day after at his office at the Ministry of Defense, 1 hour and a half or so, to check a few points. We made the interview in English. He speaks fluent English. And his advisor, Uri Dan, was there all the time, taping the interview too with his own tape recorder. Sharon seemed absolutely relaxed, anxious to explain, sure of himself, while his wife kept offering me any kind of food that I could not eat, and that he ate. He eats a lot. That's why he's so monstrously huge, so unbearably fat. He behaved with extreme politeness. Nothing but his thundering, soldierly voice denounced his taste for violence, his habits of ferociousness. And though in his typical evasive way, he shrewdly answered every question. Moreover, he never shouted at me, though I sometimes shouted at him. But when this happened, his eyes grew scary. The man has scary eyes, blue, firm, cold, and sharpened like knives which sink into your flesh to tear it up and off. Now, each time I think of Sabra and Shatila, I see those eyes. And I hear his thundering, soldierly voice saying to me, quotes, I made those murderers a gift, the gift of life. I gave them the chance to live. They are alive because I chose to let them alive. Such luck is not a guarantee for the future. Woe to them if they dare to start again with their bloody activities, even in the countries which are far from Israel's. Woe to them, unquote. Then I hear that voice again, and this time he is on TV, the day before the massacres. He says, remember, the 2,000 terrorists who remain in the Palestinian camps of Beirut will be eliminated. Thus, to reconstruct the mechanics of the slaughter on which Mr. Begin refuses an inquest, he's right, I would do it his place, becomes very easy. It's Wednesday afternoon in Beirut, and Sharon troops have completed their thieves' occupation of West Beirut, started at 2 in the morning under the pretext of establishing, quote, law and order, unquote, after the assassination of Bashir Shumayel. From the south of the city to the promenade Masra, they mop up and search and arrest and deport, God knows where, while through the loudspeakers they repeat in Arab, quote, all men surrender if they want to save their families. The Israeli army promises that their life will be spared, unquote. Many hundreds do, to be sent to the 2 stadiums of Haqqani, where the interrogations take place for those who refuse to cooperate, at coups of razor in the cheeks. It is the phalangists and the Christian militiamen who do this, while the Israelis watch. But the real job has still to be done. The job for which the Israelis have come, the job that Sharon has been longing for years, to wipe them all out, those dirty Palestinians, to eliminate them physically, to annihilate any trace of Palestinian nationalism and request. So, the Israeli tanks surround the camps where Sharon says that 2,000 PLO are still hidden. Not true. Maybe a few have remained, maybe. But in reality, the camps are inhabited by the relatives of the guerrillas who evacuated, their parents, their wives, their children. But entering the camps and rooting those people out house by house, person by person, may be dangerous. And Sharon does not like to lose soldiers. His officers don't either. They have this bizarre idea of making the war without dying, this extravagant belief that death must occur on the other side only because the life of an Israeli counts, the others don't. Furthermore, doing it personally would be a scandal. The Americans could get very angry. The Europeans could give serious trouble. The Arabs might resume old hostilities. And the opposition at home might raise its head, overthrow the government. Quotes, the hands of the Israeli soldiers must stay clean. The purity of their arms must be preserved, unquotes, words of Sharon. How to solve the problem? It's already solved, of course. Sharon has found a real smart solution. He has subcontracted the job to his Christian vassals and to his Christian mercenaries, the phalangists of Gemayel and the militia of Major Saad Haddad. Who is Major Haddad? He is an ex-deserter of the Lebanese Air Force who calls himself a Christian pilot and who started his career of wage earning assassin in 1975 with the Syrians. Then, in 1978, he passed to the Israelis who paid him better. Not by accident, he maintains a bank account in Tel Aviv. Major Haddad is a private army by the Israelis, armed by the Israelis, paid by the Israelis, and he holds all, which is from Beaufort to the Litany. He has under his vision cities of Santile, 150 kilometers from Beirut. He knows how to favors for his friends. When those Palestinians who helped the Jordanian soldiers and killed 69 women and children. Haddad will do him in Sabra and Shatila. He will do also that in Sabra and Shatila. The beast, the fool. Fool was I tell. Hate violence. I have never committed an act of violence. My violence is only verbal. I don't even go hunting anymore. I don't even shoot a bird, a rabbit. But if I were the father of one of those slaughtered children, the husband of one of those slaughtered women, the son of one of those slaughtered old ones, I would say, woe to you, Sharon, woe to you, Haddad, woe to you. And then I would go to Beirut or somewhere else. And Haddad militia, the Christian militia, the Gemayel phalangists, the Christian phalangists arrive. They arrived that very same Wednesday afternoon, not less than 1,400, probably more. They arrived with Israeli trucks, waving Israeli and Lebanese flags. The witnesses of this exist in abundance, not only Palestinians, for instance, the Scandinavian doctors of the nearby Haka hospital. And the Israeli let them in, with Sharon orders to seek and out and destroy the terrorists. The words were said at the Knesset. And with the necessary data. Let them in, Sharon had said in a public meeting. We will give them the necessary data. And you know the rest, don't you? You read the newspapers, don't you? They started that afternoon. They went on all night, thanks to the flares lighted up by the Israelis. Then all the day after, which was Thursday. Then all the following night with the flares. Then all the day after, which was Friday. Then all the following night, again with the flares, until Saturday morning, while the Israeli soldiers and the nearby tanks heard the screams, the begging for helps, the explosions, the shootings, and the Israeli officers who had settled their observation post in two buildings next to the Kuwait embassy could see very well from the rooftop what happened in the camp of Shatila. It was not a secret at all, you know. You've read Newsweek. When James Pringle of Newsweek tried to enter the camp of Sabra and heard the shooting, he asked a Haddad officer, "What's happening there?" And the officer answered, cheerfully, Pringle says, "We're slaughtering them." Old people, pregnant women, children, babies, the last ones, usually shot in the forehead. Then, other nice Christian things which demonstrate that life is precious only when it is an Israeli life or a Christian life. Like the case of that 19-year-old nurse of the Haka hospital who was taken by Haddad men simply because she was a Palestinian, raped many times, but many of them then executed against the wall. That's enough. But now tell me, whose is today the Holocaust? And now, since I have been asked to read you part of this interview, which is in the end a very interesting debate between a person who has such a naive, childish concept of politics as I have, and the general who thinks all in a different way, I will read you something of that. Now, I will skip the beginning, which is a little old, by the way, and I will get to this part. Here Sharon speaks about, he has been speaking until now about the PLO referring to them exclusively as terrorists. I put him a question. Falaj, General Sharon, here I need a parenthesis. Why do you call them terrorists? A terrorist is someone who spreads terror among the unarmed, for instance, a defenseless citizen walking in the street. He's someone who blows up a car, a bus, a building, and no doubt that the PLO has committed those unbearable crimes. I bluntly told it to Arafat and to George Abbas when I interviewed them years ago. Yet, in these last months in Beirut, they did not do so. In Beirut, there were soldiers who faced U.S. soldiers, guns against guns, artillery against artillery. Sharon, you remind me of Ambassador Habib, who refrained from a smile each time he read or pronounced the word combatants. In fact, he knew my reaction. No, madam. The PLO were not combatants, not even Beirut. When you enter in a surgery room of an hospital where the doctors are trying to save a wounded person, and you disconnect his oxygen wires, you order him to take him away, to place your own wounded, you're not a soldier. You're a terrorist, a murderer. When you stop a Red Cross convoy to steal the milk powder for the children and you laugh if you're begged not to do so, you're not a soldier. You're a terrorist, a murderer. The Syrians don't behave that way. The Jordanians don't behave that way. The Egyptians don't behave that way. Arafat killers do always. We had dozens of military installations at our borders with Lebanon, yet they never attacked them. They always shot the children, the women, the old people, cowards. Ask me anything, don't ask me to call them soldiers. Fallacia. The fact is, General Sharon, that you used the word terrorist as an insult. Fair enough, I agree. But what else were you all when you fought the British and the Arabs to create Israelis? The Irgun, the Stern, the Haganah, weren't they terrorist organizations? The bomb with which Begin killed 79 persons at the King David Hotel of Jerusalem in 1947, wasn't it the act of a terrorist? Even Begin admits it. Some time ago, at a lunch given for him in New York, he got up and started his speech with these words: "I am an ex-terrorist." By the way, I got a call in New York, and they said to me, "You know, he didn't say I am an ex-terrorist. He said, I am a terrorist." Sharon, the organization directed by Mr. Begin did not attack the civilians. Mr. Begin made the point of honor in recommending his men not to hit the civilians. The bomb at the King David Hotel was aimed to the British military, and the responsibility for their deaths belongs to the British High Commissioner, who had been warned half an hour before it burst, but instead of evacuating the hotel, he escaped all alone. Possible. We were not terrorists. We were freedom fighters, and we fought against the British occupation. Fallacia. Someday, I will have to be told whether killing tens of military who sleep or have tea is an act of war or not. However, also Arafat men calls themselves freedom fighters, and they say they fight against the Israeli occupation. Now tell me, don't you regret not having entered Beirut and not to have killed them all? Even as a general, don't you feel deprived of something, unsatisfied? Well, I don't know if I should read the rest. Do you want me or not? Sharon, listen. I'm losing things. Listen, it's no longer a secret that last January I went secretly to Beirut in order to study the situation. I always do so. I mean, I always prepare myself accurately. I detest improvisation. So I went, I stood there 2 days and 1 night. I walked through the city, reaching the harbor where I spoke with people. Then I stopped on the top of the building which stands at the intersection of the west side and the east side and observed Beirut very carefully. Finally, I turned to the person who was traveling with me And I said to him the same words I would say to Prime Minister Begin upon my return to Jerusalem. If and when we'll have to get into Lebanon, I would like to avoid entering Beirut. Do you know why? Because even occupied by the Syrians and by the terrorists, Beirut remained the capital. A capital inhabited by hundreds of thousands of civilians. Miss Fallaci, I solemnly affirm that I never wanted to enter Beirut unless it was absolutely indispensable. And believe me, had I been convinced that we had to enter Beirut, nobody in the world would have stopped me. Democracy or not, I would have entered even if my government didn't like it. I mean, and he thought over, I would have persuaded them. I would have done it. Oh, Jesus, I promise. I spare you all the rest, and I want to go to the bombardments. Fallaci. Let's see, General Sharon. Wasn't the reason why you did not enter Beirut the fact that the Americans did not want you to enter? Am I wrong, or couldn't you ignore the anger of your allies and protectors? Anybody knows that Reagan was infuriated at you. Just think of the coldness with which he received Begin when Begin imposed his visit to Washington. Sharon. Begin did not impose his visit in Washington. You don't know Begin. Because we did not need any permission to go to Lebanon and go on with this war, American permission included. Did we ask their permissions to announce the state of Israel, to declare Jerusalem the capital of Israel, to bring there the government and the parliament? Did we ask their permission to pass the Suez Canal, to make the raid at Entebbe, to bomb the nuclear reactor in Baghdad? We are an independent country. We make our decisions freely, and we have allies, not protectors. We do not like protectors. We do not like to take orders. For the last time, I did not enter Beirut for the reasons I said, that is to spare the life of the civilians. Fallaci, for Christ's sake, no. What kind of story is that, General Sharon? For weeks you bombed those civilians in the most ferocious way, in a amount of fire that I have never seen in a war, and God knows I have been in wars, all the wars of our time. For weeks you shelled them and hit them from the sea, from the air, from the ground, and now you come with the story that you wanted to spare them a few gunshots more? Sharon, you are too hard, Miss Fallaci, too hard. Yes, I know that you were there and you saw, but I know also that we never bombed the civilians intentionally. The most bombings, and I say the most because war is war, took place where the terrorists had their bases and headquarters, that is, south of Boulevard Masra in the area of Fakani. Fallaci. Now Coventry, 1941, General Sharon. Berlin, 1945, I saw that too. But you did not bomb only there. You bombed the center also. The houses, the hospitals, the hotels, the schools, the embassies. Sharon. No, no, no. We hit them because they were next to the military installation which made them targets. We hit them because the terrorists hid themselves behind the population. Fallaci. All right, I agree. I could answer that in the last days in East Beirut, you too kept your tanks next to the Alexandra Hotel and the Hospital Hôtel de Dieu. So every night and every dawn it was a hell of Palestinian mortars and Katyushas. But I prefer to say that here you are right. Besides, the PLO did something worse at times. They kept the anti-aircraft on the roof of the hospitals. But the point, it isn't that. It is the exaggeration, the disproportion of your bombing. Each time a mosquito flew over Beirut, you shot the mosquito with tons of fire. If it were not so, how would you explain Reagan's indignations? It's going to be good now. Sharon, with the exaggeration with you. You describe your exaggeration, the same exaggeration which was given to President Reagan. Yes, because at a certain moment, President Reagan said that the symbol of this war was a girl with amputated arms. Someone had put on his desk the photo of a child as bandaged as a mummy, and he said so. Well, we went looking for her, and we found her. It was not a girl, it was a boy, and he had not amputated arms, just wounded arms. He had been bandaged like that because Fallaci, General Sharon. If we want to fight with photos, I can flood you with photos of children dead or wounded under those bombings. I have one in my bag. I don't feel like showing it to you. Sharon, let me see it. Fallaci, no, because I don't want to see it again myself. It hurts me. It makes me angry. It was true. Sharon, I want to see it all the same. Fallaci, I said no, it is not necessary. Sharon, yes, instead, I must see it. Fallaci, okay then. I opened the bag and I took a photo. It showed a group of dead children. Their age, more or less, 1 year and 2 years and 4 years and 6. The horrible thing, however, was not the fact that they were so little and dead. It was the fact that they were literally chopped up in pieces. Here a little foot which was missing from the body of the smallest. Here a little arm which was missing from the body of the oldest. Here a little hand opened as if to ask for mercy. Arik Sharon grabbed it decidedly, then he stared at it, and for a fraction of a second his face seemed contracted, his eyes grew dim. Soon after he returned to control and gave me back the photos. Sharon, I'm sorry. Very, very sorry. Real sorry. I am so sorry that I almost don't care to tell you that this photo resembles very much those of our children killed by the terrorists in the kibbutz. Anywhere it takes place, every death is a tragedy, and the death of a child is an unbearable tragedy. He has forgotten it in Sabra and Shapir. And then he goes on, bullshit, that's enough. I want to read you instead something that I think was particularly important in this interview, because it has to do with the accusations of expansionism which are moved to Sharon and Begin Israel. All right, here we go. That's cute. Fallaci. General Sharon, sometimes a suspicion arises. These suspicions, then instead of by security, defense, you are moved by very ambitious ambitions. I say so keeping in mind the speech that you wrote for the Institute of Strategic Studies conference, which was held last December in Tel Aviv. The one where, leaving the problem of the Soviet Union, from the problem of the Soviet Union expansionism, and describing the sphere of the Israeli strategic interest, you declare that, quote, such interests are not limited to the Arab countries in the Middle East, in the Mediterranean, in the Red Sea. And for reasons of security. In the 1980s, they must be broadened to include countries such as Turkey, Iran, Pakistan, regions like the Persian Gulf and Africa, particularly the countries of North and Central Africa. My God, it's scary. Sharon, well, I see that you really did your homework. I shall answer. Israel is a very particular country, and because of particular reasons which summarize themselves in the word persecution, we must face global problems connected with the global security. Such problems stay within three circles. I think it's fascinating when he answers a question. He goes around. Three circles. First circle, Palestinian terrorism. Second circle, confrontation with the Arab countries which threaten us with 13,000 tanks at this moment. Third circle, the Soviet expansionism, which for many years has been enlarging itself in the Middle East and in Africa. The point is how to defend our right to exist inside those three circles without becoming the Prussia of the Middle East, as you say. Fallacious. But who threatens you in Africa, in Turkey, in Iran, in Pakistan? And what do you aim to in reality, General Sharon? I wouldn't like to discover that the invasion of Lebanon was the beginning of a much vaster operation. I wouldn't like to find out that the expulsion of the PLO from Beirut was part of a much more complicated plan, let's say a Napoleonic plan. Sharon. The answer is no, definitely no. You speak as if we wanted to occupy the territories where we have strategic interest. You speak like the Turks when they accuse us. You're always accusing me to speak like Habib, to speak like Hek, to speak like the Turks. I mean, I'm not alone in these doubts, am I? When they accuse us of including Turkey in the sphere of our strategic interest because we want to invade Turkey. It is a different matter, and I will explain it with a question. Suppose the Soviets arrive on the shores of the Persian Gulf. Would this affect the strategic position of Israel or not? Suppose the Soviets take control of the oil wells of the Persian Gulf. Would it harm the sphere of our strategic interest or not? Suppose that Turkey becomes a country controlled by the Soviets. Would it endanger us or not? So, have we or haven't we the right to raise preoccupations? Does this being preoccupied mean that we want to conquer Turkey, Iran, Pakistan, the Persian Gulf, the whole of Africa? Fallacious. General Sharon, who is your real enemy, Arafat or the Soviet Union? Sharon, Miss Fallacious, put in your mind that without the support of the Soviet Union, both a military and political support, the Arab countries could never have made the war against us in 1948. They attacked us because they were pushed and fully helped by the Soviet Union. Now let's see the connection between the Soviet Union and the PLO. Very simple. The PLO is supported militarily and financially and politically by the Soviet Union because the Soviet Union has understood very well that in the atomic age, that's very interesting, terrorism is the only warfare which can be waged without risking the nuclear conflict. This might be true. In order to expand, the Soviet Union needs Arafat, the PLO. And if you tell me that Arafat is not a communist, I reply, what do the Soviets care? They only care to have him in their hands, to use him as a tool of their game, of their expansionism. Is Syria a communist country? No. Yet the Soviet Union has given Syria 1,200 tanks, hundreds of artillery, very modern jets. Is Libya a communist country? No. Yet the Soviet Union has given Libya 1,900 tanks, all that artillery and jets. Everybody shouts at the Americans, at the American weapons. I can tell you that the weapons distributed by the Soviet Union in this part of the world monstrously exceed, not monstrously, it's wrong in my opinion, the weapons that we and other countries buy from the Americans. Fallaci. I believe it, but let's go back to Lebanon. Sharon, we don't want a square centimeter of Lebanon. Fallaci. Not even in South Lebanon, in the Litani region. Remember the one of Haddad? Major Saad Haddad. I say so, General Sharon, because long before your speech for the Institute of Strategic Studies, that is in 1955, Ben-Gurion had a plan later implemented by Moshe Dayan, and according to this plan, Israel should invade Lebanon, then buy a Lebanese Maronite and make him president, then install him with a Christian regime and make a pact of alliance. Finally, they should withdraw, Israelis, and annex the Litani region. Sharon, look, there are two branches of Zionism, the political one of Weizmann and the practical one of Ben-Gurion, Golda Meir and Moshe Dayan, the old generation. In fact, if you question my mother, who is 82 years old and lives alone in her farm raising avocados, you will find that she believes only in action. I don't belong to that branch. He's a liar, damn it. I belong to the political one which believes in the agreement, the legal terms, the written words. He's a lawyer. And this is also the case with Begin's government. I assure you that we have no intention whatsoever to keep a square centimeter of Lebanon. Fallaci. But you don't need to keep anything. What you need is to elect a 34 years old friend as a president. Let's say a phalangist named Bashir Gemayel. Make a pact of alliance with him and maintain your army in the country for a while in order to protect the alliance. It is more than enough to have a colony de facto like the Soviets have in Afghanistan. Sharon, Miss Fallaci, you are a very nice woman and I want to be polite with you. I don't want to shout at you. I don't want to lose my temper, but I never heard such a slander, such an insult. You're slandering me. You're insulting me. Fallaci, why? Everybody knows that Bashir Gemayel was the card you would play. Everybody knows that you will stay in Lebanon all winter at least. You have even given your soldiers those special shoes for the cold. General Sharon, you will not stay there 15 years as you did in the Sinai, will you? Sharon, no. I really believe that this time we will stay much less. Fallaci, in spite of your necessity of protecting the new ally of yours? Sharon, I will answer in miniskirt style. That is, long enough to cover the subject and short enough to make it interesting. We don't like to interfere with the internal matters of Lebanon, but it would be hypocritical to say that we would accept a government which was ready to host the Syrians and the terrorists again. Needless to say, today's Lebanese army is not strong enough to face the threats all alone. Syria still occupies almost half of the Lebanon, the terrorists are still in Tripoli, and the Al-Beqa Valley with the Syrians, And the new government is a baby just born out of a cesarean cut. Can a baby just born out of a cesarean cut have the capability to deal with Lebanon's present situations? Certainly not. And there is something more. If the Syrians remain so near Beirut, if we abandon the control of the Beirut-Damascus road, the newly born baby will not survive. Fallaci. And what if, staying on that road, you find yourself in Damascus? Sharon, it should not be necessary to go to Damascus. It should not be necessary to go there. We don't wish to go to Damascus. We really don't. We never did. I even think that we should avoid the fight in the Al-Beqa Valley. But, here it goes, if the Syrians don't move, we don't move. And then it becomes an ugly story because I tell you, the Syrians got a problem. Our troops and artillery in the Al-Beqa Valley are in the range of 25 kilometers from Damascus.